Good evening. I'd like to call to order the November 27th, 2018 County Board meeting. It's Tuesday, time is 6:30. For me, this is my last meeting as chair. And also for some of you. Let's have a roll call, please. From our lovely Sasha.
Quisenberry. Here. Rector. Here. Rosales.
Here.
Storr. Here. Summers. Here. Tinsley. Vachaspati. Here. Anderson. Here. Clemens. Here. Clifford. Here. Cowart. Douglas. Here. Eisenman. Esri.
Here.
Furtado. Here. Goss.
Here.
Harper. Here. McGuire.
Yes.
Mitchell. Here. Patterson.
Here.
Petrie.
Present.
Weibel.
Here, we have a quorum. Tonight's prayer is a short one. O God of all seasons and senses, grant us the sense of your timing to submit gracefully and rejoice quietly in the turn of the seasons. Amen. Pledge of Allegiance.
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Will the clerk please read notice of the meeting?
Notice is hereby given that a regular meeting of the County Board, Champaign County, Illinois, will convene on November 27th, 2018 at 6:30 p.m. in the Lyle Shields Meeting Room, Brookins Administrative Center, 1776 East Washington Street, Urbana, Illinois, in said county for the purpose of allowing and ordering the payments of claims against the county, receiving and acting upon reports of committees and such other matters as may be brought before said meeting, which said meeting shall continue in session from day to day until the completion of said business.
Thank you. Seek approval of the agenda and the addendum, moved by Mr. Mitchell, second by Mr. Vachaspati. I'd like to remove one item from the consent agenda, item C2, which is an appointment with the Deputy Sheriff Merit Commission. Sheriff Walsh has informed me that the selection has to be based on a political party, since we have a new sheriff with a different political party that would impact that. So, if there's no objection, we'll remove that from the agenda. And presumably there'll be another recommendation coming from the new sheriff. And one other item I'd like to add to other business, we'll call it item 14F, would be, I'll call it board member reflections, where you can reminisce on your time here and things like that. So we won't clog the communications part of that earlier with that stuff. So. All right, any other items? Okay, motion to approve. Sorry, all in favor? Aye. All opposed, motion carries. Date and time of our next regular meeting, well, we have the biannual organization meeting will be on Monday, December 3rd, 2018, in this room at 6 o'clock, not 6 o'clock. The regular county board meeting will be Tuesday, December 18th, 2018 at 6:30. There will be no committee meetings in December. Public participation. We have a couple tonight. You have 5 minutes. First up is Mary Schultz.
Hi, everybody. I came here tonight to thank Patsy Petrie for her work as a county board member over the last 8 years. I am one of Patsy's District 6 constituents, and she has been the most active and responsive public servant I have ever had the pleasure to elect. Patsy has always been available to her constituents, no matter what our views. Everyone active in local issues knows how many meetings she can be seen attending around town. And anyone who has ever talked county business with her knows she can give you our current financials off the top of her head, as well as the census count at the nursing home. I got to know Patsy when, as county board chair and later simply as a concerned county board member, she regularly attended the monthly meetings at the Champaign County Nursing Home Advisory Board. I was there as a family member of a resident trying to improve conditions for residents and staff. Having not attended, most of you don't know how truly painful and disillusioning those meetings were to endure. While I've heard a lot of talk in favor of the nursing home the last couple years, actions speak much louder than words, and Patsy was there with us regularly enduring those painful meetings, trying to improve the living conditions of our residents. As someone involved with the nursing home, I was incredibly frustrated when some of Patsy's fellow county board members tried to portray her as anything other than an advocate for the home. Yes, she was ahead of so many of us, myself included, in realizing that the nursing home had to be sold before it bankrupted the county. That's because she can state the financial positions of the county off the top of her head. But before that, Patsy worked diligently to try to get 2 tax increases passed to increase revenue to the home. It was Patsy who would check in monthly with family members of residents to inquire about any concerns we might have. And it was Patsy and Rick Schneider who had lunch at the nursing home after hearing complaints about the quality of the food from residents and their family. And let me tell you, that is real dedication. So many of Patsy's colleagues' own lack of involvement was revealed when they attempted to depict her as cold-hearted in terms of the nursing home, having no clue that she was the only county board member we regularly saw at the facility. Thank you, Patsy, for all the hours you have given your constituents. Your hard work benefited all of us in the county. I really appreciate all you have done for me as a constituent and for your constituents at the nursing home who were unable to thank you themselves. You always worked to improve their care, and that meant a lot to me. Thanks.
Thank you, Mary. Next up is Brian Hartwig. Brian Hartwig.
Hello, my name is Brian Hartwig. I'm with TRC Environmental. It's an engineering consulting company that's been hired by Forefront Power to work on solar projects for them across the state. We provide services actually for many developers in many counties. The purpose of my coming to speak right now was born from some of the discussion that we saw, which occurred in the ELUC meeting, and primarily related to the proximity of these projects to the conservation, CR conservation, recreation zoning districts. And I just wanted to talk about what we do and how we build these in a way that we hope provides benefit to the local habitat and community. First of all, and this relates to all 3 of the projects that we have in front of you tonight. But in all cases, we are proposing to plant the vegetative screening in all locations that we were requested to do so to minimize any kind of visual impact on the local neighbors and address concerns from that perspective. But really, what is I think more impactful and relative to the conservation districts are the pollinator seed mixes that we use and plant throughout the entire property that we are operating. And really, these pollinator mixes provide a lot of benefit to the local native species. They are good habitat for monarch butterflies and other butterflies, bees, and predator insects such as ladybugs. And that's according to the National Wildlife Federation. And it also complements the USDA Natural Resources Conservation Service, their monarch butterfly habitat development program, which targets the entire state of Illinois as being critical to increasing the habitat for monarch butterflies and their ability to migrate from Canada down to Mexico. So what we are proposing in this mix will be of benefit to all of those. The federal government estimates that pollinators such as bees provide an asset of on the order of $15 billion to agriculture in the United States, and that bees and many other pollinators are on downward trajectories or trends across the country, and they are have been in the news quite a bit. So In addition to that, the Audubon Society also calls out pollinator grasses as important for bird habitat because it provides the kinds of insects that birds like to eat and where they like to build their nests and provide shelter for them that would be, more akin to what they had traditionally. And that was really all that I wanted to say to that. I'm here all night and am more than happy to answer any kind of questions that you may have if you so choose to ask. Thank you.
Okay, next up is Daniel Solorzano.
Good evening. My name is Daniel Solorzano. I represent Forefront Power. I'm a project development manager for 3 of the solar PV farms that you have under your agenda tonight. Like Brian mentioned, he's working with us, TRC. We have them as consultants, and we're happy to answer any questions you have in your discussion in tonight's agenda. But really, I just wanted to give you a little bit of context of how we got here. We submitted the applications for these projects in May of this year, and I want to thank you, everybody, for their continuous work, in particular to Susan and John. They've been very elemental into making the project as good as it is today. And we're very, very excited for the program, the community solar program in particular. We have other programs that we're working on as well, but the community solar program, we've seen it work in Minnesota, we've seen it work in California, and in New York, we're participating right now, finalizing construction of several different projects. And really, like I said, we've worked with the county in trying to make this project work for everybody. We've submitted the application in May, and the ordinance was enacted somewhere mid-September. So in the last couple of months, we've tried to achieve the requirements and the requests from the community. And I just want to stress that the projects themselves are low impact. They're not going to have any visual impacts in respect to lighting. We're not proposing any lighting on the projects. We're also not, the projects themselves are not going to have any noise emitting from the project. There's only one noise, and that's from the inverter. It's going to be 60 decibels, and it's the level of noise that you hear from my voice today. With respect to the waivers required, in addition to what Brian just mentioned, I just want to say that we're also working with the property owners into making one of those sites manageable as wildlife habitats. We don't have an agreement set yet, but we're working on it, and we're open to discussing that option as well. I know there's a lot of concern on one of those sites. With respect to the other waivers, we requested, like I said, we work with John and Susan, and we have provided a maintenance agreement from the road commissioner, and we have also provided an estimate signed and sealed by a professional engineer. And we can continue to make these projects better if we need to. And finally, I just want to mention that the program itself, I've heard that there's concern on the number of applications, and I just want to stress, last week or 2 weeks ago, I attended a solar power conference where the administrator of the IPA gave a speech, and he mentioned that there are between 7 and 15 times of applications submitted for the number of incentives they have planned. So the likeliness of each project that has been submitted to this county and our jurisdiction is very low. There are also big unknowns in terms of utilities and interconnections and the cost that they might provide. So some of the projects that you're seeing today or in other days might not go through. And I just want to say that the projects themselves are temporary. These are going to be in its place for 20 years, and like I mentioned, we already have a decommissioning plan in place to make it better after we remove the structures. And last comment I have is related to the property owners. On November 14th, the Federal Reserve Bank of Minneapolis found that the number of bankruptcies in farm operations doubled in 2014 and surpassed the mark hit in 2010 at the height of the Great Recession. Based on the report, the Federal Reserve states that the current price levels and trends suggest that the number of bankruptcies will continue to rise. And I say that because, one, throughout the months that I work in Illinois, a lot of property owners have come to me, most of them farmers, that would like to engage in this program. Some of the farmers see this as a retirement, and they also want to, try to make an income other than just farming. And I just want to thank you all, and I'm here available for any questions or comments related to the project.
Thank you. Next up is Bob Glassa? Not sure, I don't think I pronounced your name right.
That's pretty close.
Oh,
Yep, my name is Bob Glass. I live at 1753 County Road 2200 East, which makes me the neighbor to the north, immediate north, adjacent to the proposed, I think we're calling it St. Joe West, the Woodard one. So just a little perspective, I had not planned to speak, and I don't intend to speak long, but I was fairly active and wrote a letter during the appeals process that had a lot of my thoughts in it, and I won't try to get all those out here. I guess I feel like I should provide some summary of what this experience has been like. I bought my property in June and received the Forefront Power packet. We closed June 1, and I think the packet was in my hands June 10th or 12th, so that was kind of almost in advance of the welcome packet we got from St. Joe was this news. So since that time, we've kind of learned a lot about county business and county meetings, and I come away with that realizing it's a tremendously involved process, and I have a good feeling for Forefront Power. They've been responsive. I know they got started long before the county had a jump start on doing the ordinance. But having said that, I guess I'd like to encourage you to remember that the ordinance that was passed, and I think it was, August 23rd, or might be the wrong date. As I said, I didn't plan on speaking. But the ordinance that was passed was comprehensive and good. And even though Forefront's been very responsive to concerns, many of which I enumerated in my letter, it still leaves you with a waiver on the conservation recreation zoning district and another waiver or overlooking, I guess might be the better word, of something that I don't fully understand, but it's the 1.5 mile boundary that is important to the village, and something you all are way more versed than I am on it. And I think even though that we'd like to see a win-win where everybody gets what they want, but regardless of what kind of homeowner you are, or whether you're a neighbor, or whether you're more concerned about the farmland, I think the county board had a lot of wisdom when they put that ordinance together, and it included respect for the conservation recreation district, and it included perhaps a too quick disregard for the 1.5 mile historical respect you give to the village ordinance. I'm not the right person to speak on that. But perhaps a little bit of a surprise, as the neighbor immediately to the north, I'm also not the guy that thinks this is the worst thing in the world. They have been responsive. I think it would be a decent project. But in the end, I don't like the precedent that we're going to go through a waiver process and ignore things that were put in place. I think it would be unwise to do that. So I'm here to ultimately say I hope you will vote no to adopt the ordinance on that topic. Thank you.
does anybody else wish to speak in public participation tonight? Seeing none, we'll close that. Move on to the consent agendas, or anybody want to pull anything else off the consent agenda? Okay, is there a motion to approve the consent agenda? Moved by Mr. Quisenberry, second by Mr. Goss. Roll call, please.
Quisenberry?
Yes.
Rector? Rosales? Storr? Summers? Botchespati?
Yes.
Anderson? Clemens?
Yes.
Clifford? Coert? Douglas?
Yes.
Eisenman?
Yes.
Esri?
Yes.
Furtado? Goss?
Yes.
Harper?
Yes.
McGuire? Mitchell? Patterson?
Yes.
Petrie?
Yes.
Weibel?
Motion carries. Next up is communications. Remember, leave your reminiscing for later. Ms. Petrie.
Thank you very much. I was tasked again by the Illinois Heritage Association to share with all of you and our elected officials the book that they put together and published celebrating the 150th anniversary here in the county, and they hope you will enjoy it. The history and information and the pictures are terrific, and I will let Pat Miller, who's the executive director of the Illinois Heritage Association, know that I didn't complete my tasks this evening. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Petrie. Anybody else have anything at this time? Okay, let's move on to approval of minutes. I seek approval of minutes of the public hearing of FY 2019 budget on October 9th, 2018, the public hearing on truth and taxation October 18th, 2018, and the regular meeting of October 18th, 2018. Is there a motion to approve all three? Moved by Mr. Rosales, second by Mr. Storr. Discussion. See none, all in favor? Aye. All opposed? Motion carries. Okay, let's move on to standing committees. We got one item from county facilities. Mr. Harper.
Yes, motion for the adoption of resolution number 2018-360, authorizing the fiscal 2019 Champaign County Courthouse parking rates.
Second by Mr. Anderson. Discussion. Mr. Vassaspati.
Yeah, so I've been the thorn in the side of this for a couple months now, which I think is probably too long to spend on this. But what I will say is that right now we're setting the rate to 50 cents for the first 2 hours and $1 after that. But everywhere else in Urbana is either 50 cents period or per hour period, or 25 cents for the first 2 hours and 50 cents after that. So, I don't think it should be $1 after the first 2 hours, but so I didn't seem to get much support for that in committee.
Ms. Petrie.
Well, I'd like to offer an amendment. However, I sent a question to Dana and understand that he is on vacation, so I will offer the amendment, and those better informed as to the mechanism can then tell me if it's possible or not. And my amendment is to amend the first 30 minutes free, the first hour, then 50 cents, and then after the first hour, $1.
Is there a second? Mr. Vassaspati, second that. Discussion. Ms. Petrie.
Actually,
May I
can you
speak to
repeat
that? I'm
your
sorry?
motion? Can you repeat your motion?
Yes, what I said is that the first 30 minutes to be free, then the first hour, 50 cents, and then any following hours, $1. All right. May I speak to my motion? Thank you very much. I did a little bit of what we call windshield survey and watching that parking lot, and noticed that many people are using it just to come in and pay a fine or things like that, which is very short term. They can get in and out in a relatively short period of time. If it takes a little bit longer, then the cost to them would be 50 cents. After that, $1. And the reason I am proposing that is the purpose of that parking lot is for people using the courthouse. And if it's a much lower rate, as Mr. Vassaspati mentioned at previous meetings, is concerned about that, I think there'll be a tendency for people filling up that lot because the rates will be less than using the alternatives that are in Urbana, and that's not the purpose of that lot. So trying to figure out a compromise proposal on how we could handle this. This is what I'm proposing in my amendment. What I'm not sure of, since I couldn't have a technical conversation with Dana, I'm not sure if the mechanism that he has chosen and will be implemented can handle 30 minutes of free. And I'm
going to call Ms. Busey, may be able to add some information.
For the purposes of enforcement, there would be no way for the Urbana parking enforcement to know when someone parked there. So parking free for anyone at any time is impossible to monitor. There are no tickets. I mean, we have a machine that you pay and a parking space that you park in. So arguably, you know, parking enforcement comes randomly throughout the day.
Thank you for that information. I'm sorry I didn't get it sooner. I talked to the chair of the committee, and he couldn't help me.
Further discussion. Mr. Quisenberry, do you want to
No,
speak on this?
seriously, I will withdraw the amendment.
Okay. Mr. Buster's Party?
Yeah, I mean, I will add that I do see this as a court fee, and I think that's how we should think about this parking fee as a court fee, and we should think about whether we want the fee for parking in the courthouse lot to be higher than the fee to park elsewhere in Urbana, in downtown Urbana.
Okay, so we're back to the main motion with no amendment. Further discussion? Ms. Petrie?
Yes, a clarification. Actually, there's two proposals here. Is that being made clear as to which is the main motion? Okay, but there is a second one, so,
It's on page 90.
I got it.
Was the one that was moved.
So it's only for the first proposal.
Mr. Chair, the resolution we read is the motion that passed committee.
Correct.
Yeah.
I mean, page 91 is other information. Further discussion? Seeing none, all in favor? Aye. All opposed?
No.
Motion carries. Thank you, Mr. Harper. Next up is environmental land use, Mr. Esri.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I move adoption of resolution number 2018-361, approving subdivision case 201-18, Slingers Country Club subdivision.
Is there a second? Second by Ms. Petrie. Discussion. Mr. Esri.
I'll just mention this one note that John Hall has here on down for me. In ELUC, we passed it with the condition that the health department approve the soils for a septic system because that hadn't been done yet. Well, that has been done now, so that's why there's no mention of it in this resolution. It's been taken care of. So for those of us on ELUC committee who were there and remember that, just thought I'd make a note of it.
Thank you. Any other discussion? Seeing none, all in favor? Aye. All opposed? Motion carries.
I move adoption of resolution number 2018-362, recommending the Muhammad Aquifer Protection Task Force to propose actions to preserve water quality and sustainable availability of water from the Muhammad Aquifer.
Is there a second? Mr. Starr seconds it.
And
Discussion.
I was just gonna,
Mr. Esri?
thanks. I was just going to say I would let Mr. Storr speak more to this since.
Mr. Starr, you have the floor if you want it. No, that's not out. There you go.
There we go. Thank you. In light of some problems that have arisen in terms of contamination of the aquifer, and because of the large cone of depression that's and withdrawals that have been made and have been an object of concern not only for the landowners but also for the scientific community. I recommended this resolution as a matter of public health and safety, and also as because our drinking water is the foundation of our local economy. I'd also like to point out that most of the recommendations for the further scientific study using the helicopter-borne time domain electromagnetic geophysics, and I'm be glad to speak to that in detail if anybody wants to. it would provide good additional framework that would be needed to further define the boundaries and sand and gravel and resources within the aquifer in a way that we currently don't have. Most of the information is from borings that happen to be made where people want them, and it's not systematic. But I'd also want to see actual protections instituted. We've endured contaminations. One of our own board members has endured this. That's a very sad thing. For those of us who've been in places where there's been water contamination or where there is no drinking water, we recognize the value of water in our daily lives, and we should take care to protect this valuable resource. And that would include updating methods for landfill inspections, looking at the 218 landfill complexes that lie over the Mahomet Aquifer and determine whether some of these or any of these are sources of contamination and need some sort of remedial action. We should also look at the occurrence of improperly sealed and abandoned wells. These are direct conduits right into the aquifer, and making sure that these are both found and properly sealed would protect water quality. Household hazardous waste and small quantities of industrial waste and so forth that can be put in ordinary waste and hauled off to landfills are sources of concern among working professionals, because in the long term, these pose threats to water quality. If we can work with our we already have one group in Champaign County working to devise ways of improving household hazardous waste disposal. And we should try to do this for all of the counties in the Mahomet Aquifer area. And there are other recommendations in the resolution, and I'd be glad to answer any questions that board members have about these.
Further discussion. Mr. Bashir.
Yeah, so my understanding is that the county board doesn't have a presence on the Mahomet Aquifer Task Force?
That's correct.
Okay, so I guess my question is, I think this is great. I think this is a great letter to send to the Mahomet Aquifer Task Force, but sort of beyond that, and maybe this is outside of the scope of this motion, but, you know, what can we do as a county government to make these things happen? And I'm sure that's outside of the scope.
Probably not a lot.
Yeah, so.
I think it's a state level thing.
So far.
Please.
I just wanted to say that during the ELOC that this came up, who is on the task force, and so I printed out a list of all of the members that are on the task force, and we have several that represent Champaign County, but so you can look at this if you want. None from the board, though. You are correct.
I'll point out that those members are appointed by the governor. Ms. McGuire.
Yeah, I had some of the same concerns that he did, Brent Paul, that I don't know what resources we have or authority we have to do some of the things that are on this list, or the funding to do these things. And sure, while I agree completely that this is something that's very important to this county and the other counties around us as part of the aquifer. I'm a little resident to try to vote for something or pass something that we can't actually endeavor to do, unless it's just something we just want to pass along that we want to try to accomplish.
Further discussion. Mr. Esri.
I guess I would say, yes, we don't have a whole lot of direct authority over this as a county board, but we need to have a voice and at least make our desires known, and this is one way to do that. If you don't say anything, then it's one of those, I guess I would say you don't have any right to complain, so we might as well at least try and make our voice heard. We can't say that they're going to listen to us. We can't say that any of this thing's going to get done, but hopefully it's not in vain, the whole task force, but ultimately it could be. It's not in our hands, it's not in our power, but I guess I look at this as this is almost maybe the best we can do, especially at this point in time.
Ms. Petrie, did you have a comment?
Thank you. It builds a bit on what Mr. Esri just said. Mr. Storer, after this was discussed at the ELUC agenda meeting, went back and captured many of the things that are evolving in the task force report. So this is a good reinforcement for where they're moving. This has gone on for decades, and there are many different agencies working on the Mahomet Aquifer. And if we can put one more oar in the water to move this along, that would be great. We don't have any jurisdiction. That's actually correct, and I don't often support resolutions where we can't really do anything about, but this is very important to our community and all the way across the middle of the state. So I do hope others will support this, though it may appear to many to just be a vain struggle.
Mr. Storer, final comment?
Thank you. I'd note that this is there we go. I'd thank you, Jim. I'd point out that this is a resolution that would be forwarded to the Mahomet Aquifer Protection Task Force, which is writing a report to the General Assembly, which does have jurisdiction over the Mahomet Aquifer, and it proposes specific recommendations, protections, and studies, and so while we don't have direct authority, this resolution would go right to the task force, which is making these recommendations. Does that? I hope that answers some of the questions about that.
Further discussion? See none, all in favor? Aye. All opposed? Motion carries.
I move adoption of resolution number 2018-363, requesting the Army Corps of Engineers to hold a public hearing regarding project ID LRL-2018-602-SJK, riverbank armoring along the Middle Fork of the Vermilion River.
Is there a second? Second by Ms. Petrie. Discussion. Mr. Rector.
This is Vermilion County.
I believe that's correct. You have further comment, Mr. Rector?
I'm seeking clarification.
It is in Vermilion County.
So I guess I'm just curious. Mr. Esri, would you explain why we're doing this, sir?
Go ahead, Mr.
Okay,
Esri.
thanks. This is dealing with the fly ash over along the Middle Fork over in Vermilion County. And the idea that while that part of the whole Vermilion River system isn't in this county, it's a shared watershed and water quality. I guess I would kind of say I would somewhat maybe speak for the ELUC. All this, maybe not everybody agrees with it, but the idea that water quality is, we're seeing with Muhammad Aquifer that we just passed affects everyone. So it's just the idea that yes, it's not directly in our county, but we hear about it a lot, and they're our neighbors, and it can't hurt to help try and, we're requesting that the Army Corps of Engineer, I guess, be open to more public comment, is what you could say, instead of just doing what they're going to do without public comment. But it's just, the idea that with water, it's a shared resource, and the idea that it needs to be protected.
Mr. Quisenberry.
Yeah, well, the Middle Fork comes out of Champaign County, and you can put a canoe in Champaign County and go down that scenic waterway, and we're connected. So I don't know why we wouldn't want to preserve that scenic river.
Other discussion. Mr. Storer. I think you should give up on that one.
Thank you. I support this resolution for the reasons that Jim and Aaron have elaborated. Even though this may not be directly in Champaign County, is a shared resource, and just as the Muhammad Aquifer is, and I support this.
Further discussion, Mr. Vachapati.
What's the extent of our county's collaboration with Vermilion County on this? Do we have people talking to their people?
I don't know the answer to that. Anybody else know the answer? Ms. Petrie, can you answer that?
Actually, this is coming from a very active citizen group that has been working on this issue for quite a long time. And so if this resolution gets approved, it really will have a deeper and quicker effect than the one going to the Muhammad Aquifer Task Force, where it'll get buried in paper. This will go directly to them. And they have been having issues with the Army Corps of Engineers not holding public hearings. So this is rather important.
Oh, good.
Well, that wasn't really my question. My question is, are there people, elected officials or county staff talking to elected officials or county staff in Vermilion County about this issue?
What I'm trying to say to you that this is being driven by a citizen group, and if there are elected officials, they are coming as part of the citizen group. It's not being driven by elected officials.
No, I understand that, but I think that, it seems like maybe there's some intergovernmental cooperation that could be useful in this regard, in this matter.
Mr. Storer.
I've been to some of the public meetings, and at least our state senator shares, it includes some of the boundary falls over into Vermilion County and in this area.
Further discussion. See none, all in favor? Aye. All opposed? Motion carries.
I move adoption of ordinance number 2018-6, granting a special use permit in zoning case 903-S-18, Wolf Works, Sydney Site 1, Community Photovoltaic Solar Farm.
Is there a second? Second by Mr. Patterson. Discussion. Please.
I actually contacted Chuck White, the mayor of Sydney, yesterday afternoon because I wanted to see what the village feels about this particular solar farm. And he said they are not against the solar farm, but they are against coming within a half a mile of their city limits. And so he's against it for that reason. He just said we have ordinances in place, and he wants to see us stick to them. He said that he went to meetings for a year trying to get the ordinance in place, and then it was the next day that the waiver was requested. And so he just wants to see these waivers, or these ordinances that we put in place, just to stick to those. So I just thought I would share that.
Further discussion? Ms. Petrie.
Well, I will state what I stated at ELUC and have stated previously, that as an urban planner, any ordinance that is recently been passed and everything that is coming through under that ordinance that has variances is a real indicator that that ordinance isn't well-written and isn't working well. The gentleman did have momentarily indicated that it's going to be a tough call as to who will be pulled out of the lottery. Right now, there's 1,600 proposals in the lottery, and the funding will not cover but a very small percentage of those. And as we asked one time at ELUC, if you don't get the incentive, will you go ahead with the project, because those groups have invested a whole lot of time in the work they've done? And the answer is no, they won't. And they're only getting 13%. That's all it is. It's not a huge amount of money, but that's the differential that's important to make the projects grow. Personally, on all three of these projects, because every one of them has 1, 2, 3 variances, I would like to see them stayed. And I mentioned at ELUC that I think it's important for that ordinance to go back for reconsideration, and anything that isn't approved this time will go into the next round of the lottery that's already established, and those that don't pass in that one will fall back to a third lottery down the line. So it's not, this is the only shot of getting chosen out of the lottery, and people need to give some serious consideration. The waiver about decommissioning doesn't bother me. That's understandable because they don't want to spend money on getting decommissioning proposals set up. That variance doesn't bother me. It's the other ones.
Mr. Quisenberry, then I'll come to you, Ms. Esri.
Yes, I did want to point out that at ELUC, when we considered the three that are on the agenda, there was some discussion that it was important that this appear on the full county board agenda to give both an opportunity for people to come and make public comment, because there wasn't as much public comment as I would have expected at ELUC. And I came to this meeting after the ELUC discussion expecting to vote yes for one of these and no for another of these, but this one was the one I was kind of up in the air on, and at this point, I will probably vote yes for it because of its location and how it looks in my mind. There was no public comment that came to speak against it. I appreciate the message from the mayor of Savoy, or from Sydney, but that's not, he doesn't want it, but he's not against it. That's kind of a mixed message. So I'll probably vote for this one, but I wanted to explain that that doesn't mean I'm going to vote yes for all of them.
Mr. Esri.
Thank you. First off, I'll note it was alluded to by the one public comment person. The planning and zoning has received a copy of a decommissioning cost estimate for all three of these solar farms on 11/26/18 by an Illinois licensed professional engineer. So that waiver would be not, yeah, it's moot, it's taken care of. So that, just to make that point. And obviously not everyone agrees with me, but my thinking on the waiver of the half mile and to go even more to the 1.5 miles, I've said it before when we approved the first two solar farms at the board here. Ultimately, that's a authority that the cities don't have. It lies with the county. We do need to be respectful of it. But I guess this applies for all three of them at this point in time. I'm intending to vote for all three of them at this point in time. I haven't been shown that it's such an egregious harm to the villages or the neighbors above and beyond what I consider to be the personal property rights and other issues in my mind that I'm in support of them. I realize not everybody, like I say, agrees with me. That's everyone's personal choice. And so be it.
Further, Mr. McGuire.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have a question, just to clarify. Is this within the half mile of Sydney? I don't see it listed. This one.
It's not within the half mile. I believe it is within the mile and a half.
Right.
So it's.
Mr. Hall, could you answer that question?
Just for clarification.
It is within the mile and a half, but it's further than a half a mile.
And so the waiver beyond the decommissioning that we're most considering is the conservation recreation zoning waiver, which is obviously way within the 2,600 feet.
Mr. Goss.
Yeah, this current one is number 3, and we'll have 4 and 5 tonight. I overwhelmingly supported with the board the Ludlow location because it came to us without any waivers. I will not be in support of any of these 3 because I think this ordinance was just put in, and 4 of the 5 have had waivers requested. Decommissioning, again, I wouldn't spend the money on the decommissioning agreement until you see whether you get it. We have in place things that say you're going to have to bring it before we can approve with the project. But all of them have been inside of the half mile. Most have been inside the half mile, and then you've got 2 of these 3 that are inside of the half mile on the conservation districts. I mean, why did we monkey around and waste the time of the Zoning Board of Appeals when the first thing we do is just start waiving them on all these projects? I mean, maybe Ms. Petrie is right. Maybe we just need to stay these and go back and rewrite the ordinance. But I think it's a mistake to continue to push these through when we have waivers coming up with every single one of them that have to do with distances. So I won't be in support of any of these 3. Thank you.
Mr. Esri.
This will be my final comment. I believe all 3 of these were submitted, as was also said in public, before we even had an ordinance. So they had no idea what our ordinance was. They chose what they considered to be the best locations for their projects based on their criteria. I don't know what that is. I'm not going to pretend to know what that is. Other than the one that's pretty obvious, it needs to be near a substation of some kind. Those substations are generally near populated areas because that's where the power is used. And Mr. Hall has said before, at least in ELUC, that were he to do the zoning ordinance over again, he probably would not recommend any distance of separation from the CR districts because most of the substations are close to the CR districts. The CR districts are already largely developed with housing. It's not like they're pure forest, not undeveloped along the rivers for just absolute pristine wildlife habitat. That's not the case. They're already, and I believe that's it. Thanks.
Further discussion. I do want to point out that this and the next 2 will require a roll call, but only a simple majority. Ms. Petrie.
I do want to remind everybody, should these be approved, you've set precedents. And so you're not going to be able to back away from precedents when other ones come forward. And it's much cleaner to stay these and work on the ordinance and then come back and bring these forward again. And I did not remember the history Mr. Esri just laid out, so it's sort of like asking for forgiveness rather than permission.
Mr. McGuire.
I don't understand the precedent statement. I can't change and decide a different waiver affects the zoning issue differently next time?
Sure, if you've given a waiver for a certain thing and then a very similar one comes up, then you don't have any grounds to not give a similar waiver. I mean, that's just plain
Mr. Hall,
wrong.
could you comment on that? Or you can say no if you want to.
No, I'd like to comment on that. I agree with where I think Mr. McGuire was going. Every zoning case is a set of facts. You review those facts, you make a decision on those facts. I can't imagine you would ever have two zoning cases with the exact same facts. The world just isn't that uniform. That being said, I don't know beforehand how much variability there is, but I don't worry a lot about precedents because I've never seen two zoning cases that are the same.
Mr. Ezra.
Since Ms. Petrie spoke after I did, the idea of asking forgiveness, no, they asked for permission without knowing the rules of the game. And then we set the rules of the game that said, okay, you don't fit the rules of the game, so we're going to ask for a waiver. It wasn't asking, they're not asking for forgiveness, they're asking for a waiver. Asking for forgiveness would be they went and built it and then said, okay, now make us conform to your zoning, one way or the other, in my opinion. And the idea of precedence, well, again, they're playing by the rules as they are right now. There's talk about maybe wanting to go back into the zoning ordinance and rewrite this to make it 1.5 miles to coincide with the ETJ of the incorporated villages and cities, municipalities. Okay, if we do that and that happens, well then those next people, when and if they apply after that new the ordinance is amended, then they'll have that set of rules to apply by. But right now, these are the rules they have to apply by. But again, these solar farms had no rules to go by when they made their application. And of course, if you go back, the whole reason we're getting these is because of the FEJA, is it Federal Energy Jobs Act? So if it wasn't for that, we wouldn't have these applications. I don't know if we'd even have been discussing a solar farm ordinance at this point in time. It all came on as hot and heavy. It is because of the idea of the lottery coming up in January, the middle of January. By the end of January, unless, of course, this state, they could mess it up, but I assume by the end of January, we'll know which projects have been selected, because I believe it's supposed to happen right in the middle or so of January. These may or may not get selected. There may or may not be another round. They've maybe indicated it, but again, they'll have to have the money for it. It's one of those, right? I guess I see it too. One final comment. This will be my final comment. This applies for all three of them. This is, granted, the projects are not a definite go, but this is the here and now. We're discussing projects that could definitely happen. The idea of I know this is outside, but it's all tied together. The idea of St. Joe or Sydney developing into these other areas, yes, that's a possibility, but that's multiple years down the road. That's not going to happen tomorrow. This project is, in effect, potentially going to happen tomorrow. It's not going to happen 10 years from now. Whereas the idea of St. Joe growing across 74 or Sydney growing out towards Homer, that 1.5 miles, the idea especially of Sydney growing out that 1.5 miles, I've lived in this county, I've lived in St. Joe Township since I was 2, when Dad moved back to the home farm. I don't see that ever happening. I personally don't see St. Joe ever crossing 74. That would be more likely to me than Sydney growing towards Homer. But that's potentially multiple years down the road. This is something that is basically the here and now.
Please.
And just to add on to that, and that's part of the problem, though, because the solar farm will landlock that land for 20 to 30 to maybe even additional years. So they don't have to have a developmental plan for the next 5 years or 10 years, but within the 20 years.
Okay, any other discussion? Let's have a roll call vote, please.
Quisenberry.
Yes.
Rector. No. Rosales.
Yes.
Storr. Yes. Summers. Yes. Vatrasbody.
Yes.
Anderson. Yes. Clemens. No. Clifford. No. Coert.
Yes.
Douglas.
Yes.
Eisenman.
No.
Esri.
Yes.
Furtado.
Yes.
Goss.
No.
Harper. No. McGuire. Yes. Mitchell. Yes. Patterson.
Yes.
Petrie.
No.
Weibel.
Yes, motion carries by 13 to 8.
I got 14-7. 14-7.
Okay, 14-7, sorry.
Still what? Still passed.
This is my last meeting. I'm having problems. I was right, though. The motion did pass. Okay, Mr. Esri, next one.
Thank you. I move adoption of ordinance number 2018-7, granting a special use permit in zoning case 906-S-18, Woodard Trust, St. Joseph West, Community Photovoltaic Solar Farm.
Second by Mr. Patterson. Discussion on this item. Let's go with Mr. Harper first.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I was asked by the mayor of St. Joseph to read this letter onto record. Tammy Fruling Vogus. I passed out two different letters here. One strictly from the village of St. Joe. One is a letter having area mayors, Joan Dykser from Sydney or Savoy, Sean Widener from Muhammad, who couldn't be here tonight, Charles Smith from Rantoul, Charles White from Sydney, and also endorsed by the mayor of Ogden, Gabe Clemens. But she asked me to read this letter on the record. Dear County Board members, on your agenda for Tuesday, November 27th, you have two proposed solar farms located north of St. Joseph within our ETJ to be considered by approval. Unfortunately, we are unable to have representatives to speak on the village's behalf due to our own regularly scheduled board meeting. Attached are copies of the resolutions objecting to both of these solar farms. Our objectives are clearly stated in the resolutions, but we wanted to be sure that our lack of village representation was not misunderstood. Just to highlight a couple of additional concerns with the location north of Shern's Nursery would be that this site is particularly located within the floodplain. The waiver for 135 feet to the Conservation District is also concerning. Our recommendation would have to leave this site undeveloped due to flooding, additional concerns for the wildlife, and impact of the drainage leading to the Salt Fork. We understand that our growth has slowed down the past 12 years, but we are presently working on plans for infrastructure improvements and opening the door for growth opportunities for the village. Your board has already approved one solar farm north of the St. Joseph Sportsman's Club. This location is also located in the village's ETJ, although probably the least objectionable due to its location. Potentially 61 acres of our ETJ would be covered in solar farms if all three locations are approved. The county board in the past has advocated for compact urban growth. By allowing the solar farms within a half mile of our village boundaries, this would not only take prime farm ground out of production, but also prevent the village of potential growth compact to our boundaries. This becomes an additional obstacle for the village of St. Joseph. Please take our objections into consideration as you move forward with your approval process of these solar farms. We don't necessarily agree with the idea of solar as an energy alternative, but these locations are not in the best interest of the future of St. Joseph. Respectfully yours, Tammy Fruling Vogus, Mayor of St. Joseph, endorsed by the village trustees. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Harper. Further discussion? Mr. Esri? Okay.
Thank you. I know some of St. Joe's not going to be happy with me. The idea that this landlocked St. Joe, I don't agree with that. It's 61 acres. If you take that whole mile and a half around St. Joe, that's a lot of acres. They can grow south, east, west. They can still grow north. They can grow right up around those solar farms if they ever need to. Okay, maybe you don't put houses right up against them. You have a bit of a buffer area. There's already buffers on the property that are here anyway. It's I believe about a 40, the larger one, the one that we aren't discussing right now, but it's germane because it's all north of St. Joe. It's 40 some acres, and they're only going to develop like, I believe 24 or something of it. So there's already kind of a built-in buffer. The prime farmland. Yes, it is prime farmland. It's not going to hurt it, in my opinion. It's going to fallow it. Fallow it. When it comes out, you put it right back into production. Not a problem. You're probably better off for it in terms of soil structure. The CR districts, again, they're largely developed. The CR district that this is, if you're at all familiar with St. Joe, the CR district is Heather Hills. That's all developed with houses right up along the Salt Fork. That's where people want to live, and that's where they are living out in the county, largely. So again, I don't see that this is such an egregious use for this land, that it totally harms St. Joe. It keeps them from growing. I don't agree with that personally. I understand them wanting to protect their territory, to put it in those words. But I guess I could say I want to protect my territory as a county board member, and this is our authority. I don't want to necessarily just automatically, and I'm not saying that people that are going to vote these against these are doing this, but I don't think that we need to automatically be a vote for anything and everything that the villages want us to do in that ETJ. We have our own say, we have our own minds. The ZBA has their own minds. They decided that, yes, this should be advanced. We are the governmental body with this authority in this area. We don't necessarily have to just automatically rubber stamp everything that the villages want us to do.
Let's go to Mr. Bush's body.
Yeah, I've been trying to learn as much as I can about these in the last month. One thing that surprised me is I went and I did a GIS map of the ETJ, the 1.5 mile ETJ. Of the 1,000 square miles approximately in Champaign County, about 70 square miles are in the villages and towns in, sorry? It's around 70 square miles in the cities and villages in Champaign County, and there's 400 square miles in the ETJ. So of the unincorporated land in Champaign County, something like half of it is in the ETJ. So that's a lot of land to say, well, we're going to let the villages decide for people who don't, who don't vote in our elections. It's
Ms. Eisesman.
I just wanted to say, one of the biggest concerns that we had at the ELOC is that this is in a floodplain. And I taught in St. Joe, and so this isn't just a small flood, like, oh, you have some water standing. I mean, students had to have canoes. This floods. It's right by the banks of the Sangamon River. It's going to flood. That's a side note. But on to the fact that this is within, I have too many notes, within only 135 feet of a conservation recreation zoning district. And he made reference to, in that conservation recreation zoning district, that there's homes. And I live in the country, and I live in a home, and I can still see the deer in my backyard. Residential homes don't affect a deer's pattern, but having a solar farm fenced-in area is going to affect their feeding and the movement patterns of deer. So that's a side note to address that one. But I'm going to read something, but I just want to state that we are elected and voted into here to represent the whole county, of all of Champaign County. whether we live there or not. And so we have this letter here from the mayor of the village asking us to just work with them on this. And I just, with this being a questionable location, it's in a floodplain, it's going, it goes against the solar farm ordinance, it goes against the conservation recreation zoning district. It's only one solar farm to work with the village. So it's not like we're saying, oh my goodness, we're not gonna, we're gonna say no to all of them. It's not that, it's this particular one. And I'm just gonna read a quote from, they had several meetings, and this is a testimony from David and Sandra Barkas. They encouraged the board to uphold the solar farm ordinance adopted on August 23rd in full. They believe the ordinance was written to make sure the residents of Champaign County were provided with some protection and consideration. They believe that if the property in question is not suitable for solar farm use with the complete ordinance in place, the petitioner should look for more suitable property to fit their needs and still be in compliance with the solar farm ordinance of Champaign County. And so that's my whole point, is there's other places that you can put this. And so it's not in a floodplain, not within, just stick to the ordinances they are. This is just one solar farm. So if you say no to this, you're not saying no to all solar farms. You're not against solar farms. It's just working with the village on this. And we have the Conservation Recreation Zoning District in place. We have a solar farm ordinance in place. So why don't we just stick with that? And these residents, keep them all of them in the forefronts of our mind. I can't understand going against working with another village and with what people want that live there.
Mr. Quisenberry.
Yeah, I'm going to vote against this one. I wish we could put the location map up on the screen, because I think the map says 1,000 words in this case. The location of this solar farm is right on 2200 East and just north of 1700 North. If you look at St. Joe, you can see that there's already growth happening up 2200 East. And so this is a direction that the village is going to grow over time. I can't tell you how fast, but if you look at the picture, it's like, no, this is being put in close to where development might occur. And that's my finding of fact, I guess I would say, from this particular case, is that it is too close to where I think this village may end up headed in the next 20 years, potentially. So that's, when I hold these up and look at them, the one I voted on previously, I voted yes on, it's out east of Sydney. There's space between it and Sydney. I don't see Sydney touching it in the next 20 years, but I can see this happening with St. Joe, and I do respect the village's input on this particular one, because I see their point.
Mr. Summers.
Yeah, just a question. The letter from the mayor of St. Joe says the site is practically located within the floodplain. Now, it's either in the floodplain or it's not. So I need some clarification with regard to this in terms of whether this is in a floodplain or not.
Mr. Esri, can you answer that question?
Mr. Hall, I'm sure could probably just nod if I'm
Mr. Hall?
If I'm correct, but the subject property, part of it is in the floodplain. The solar farm itself, it's been crafted to stay out of the floodplain.
Mr. Hall, would you agree with that?
That's not to say that, who knows, maybe some of the surrounding fence could maybe be in the flood. And that's, of course, a 100-year floodplain. So if we get more than that, maybe even some of the solar arrays may get wet feet. But the solar farm itself is not being proposed to be put in the floodplain. Dave and Sandy Barkas, know them well. I went to school with their youngest daughter. They may not be happy with me, but I see things differently than they do. And again, everyone has their own opinion. I know they live right there. Where the solar farm itself is going, I don't remember ever seeing the actual high part of this ground underwater. The lower parts of the subject property as a whole, yes, it floods. The upper part, no. The idea of deer being affected much by this, I don't buy it. They come up to a fence, they turn, they go around it. It's a field right now. It's not like it's a habitat that they have habitual resting grounds in. If anything is habitat for wildlife as a whole, I believe it could help. Will it? I don't know. If they put in the pollinators, yes, I suppose I really think it could. But for the pollinators, butterflies and such, but the idea of having a fenced off area of grass and other lower lying vegetation, pheasants, rabbits, they might have a heyday out there. Whereas right now, they don't have anything like that to speak of that's fenced off. That's not to say that a coyote couldn't come along and dig a hole under the fence and get in there and have a feast. So it may not help with the wildlife, but when wildlife gets mentioned on any of these, again, I don't see that being a problem. Wildlife adapt is proven by the idea that they're in people's backyards, and deer adapt. There's plenty of habitat along there. Some people would say there's too many deer in the county as it is, so it's not going to harm wildlife, I do not believe, and if anything, it could help.
Mr. Hall, could you answer the question about the location of this within the floodplain?
Yeah, as Mr. Esri completed his comments, it was accurate. The map of the floodplain that's included on the plan that was in the packet is fairly accurate. The contours match the flood elevation. Some of that fence is in the fringe of the floodplain. The floodplain does go inside the fence for some small distances in certain locations. Any project that's along the Salt Fork like this would have to have state review for floodway encroachment and would have to comply with our floodplain ordinance. And I approve homes nearly every week to be built in the floodplain. That's what your ordinance allows. This solar farm, the standards for building in the floodplain are really what it amounts to is that it can't be damaged by the floodwaters. And the materials they're going to build this out of cannot be damaged by floodwaters. So I think in terms of floodplain, Mr. Esri described it accurately.
Thank you. Ms. Furtado.
I just think it's important to, unless I'm misunderstanding this property owner isn't represented by the Village of St. Joseph, right? And so while I appreciate that they have an opinion, there's also an individual property owner who owns property who has an opinion, and there has to be some place for those people to go. And this is the place for that, right? And I guess this is like my one libertarian leaning is that I actually think individual property, like what you do on it is it's kind of important that we take that into consideration. And so while I do think it's important that we take in the Village of St. Joseph's thoughts into consideration, individual property owners that are in that area, I think it's important we think about them too.
Ms. Eisenman.
I will just comment. The mayor had commented at the ELOC that the property owners of the two in St. Joe live in Chicago, so they do not live in St. Joe. And I struggle with the fact of, with farmland and agriculture, a lot of people from different states, different cities, they come down and they buy the land. And so they are not going to be individually affected by it. And so my point is, give a voice to the people, like, they aren't going to see it, they aren't going to hear it, they aren't going to be affected by it at all. And so my thing is, like, give a voice to the people that are here, because sometimes people that have more money from out of state or out of the cities are able to come in and buy up land from people that live around here.
Mr. Esri.
I guess I'll throw this out there. The idea of farmland and people owning it. Mr. Hall, in discussions with him over this issue, I brought up the idea of if a farmer wanted to build a grain handling system on this ground for his own use, we're not talking commercial, like renting space to other farmers for his own use. There's nothing prohibiting a said farmer from building any type of a grain handling system he'd want on any one of these pieces of ground. That means they could put in vane axial fans, which on a grain bins, which those are the loudest fans you can have. They could point them right at the neighbor. Now, granted, all this would be something, I mean, you'd have to be a pretty nasty guy to just do this without consideration of your neighbor. But there's nothing that can be done to stop this person from building a huge grain system, plenty of fans that when it comes harvest time, they run 24/7 for a month or more on end, semi-traffic, truck traffic, whatever, in and out, all times of the day. There's nothing. St. Joe could say nothing about it. So, I mean, this, once it's built, it's there, you look at it. Maybe you hear it. I don't believe you're going to. Maybe you hear it if you walk right up to the fence. That would be only during the day when it's producing power. It's there. There are a lot more, again, egregious uses that could be proposed for this or actually put in place and affect their neighbors. You put that grain system north of St. Joe, St. Joe would have to go around it. As far as the length of this and limiting it for 20 years, 25, 40, 50 years, as we all know, enough money, any kind of a contract could be bought out if it truly turned into a lucrative enough piece of land for development. There's ways, I mean, you pay the solar company enough money, if it's truly that important to you, they'll break the contract, they'll tear it out.
Further discussion. Ms. Petrie.
I have a technical question. The gentleman mentioned the decibel level at 60. Is that accurate?
60 is a few feet from the inverter, but the sound that the neighbors will hear because of the setbacks, that sound should be below 40 decibels.
All right, thank you.
Mr. Chair?
Go ahead, Mr. Hall.
There is one thing I've been wanting to point out, and that is that the zoning board, your zoning board of appeals stated that no one had presented any evidence, and they themselves saw no evidence of negative impacts to the CR district from this waiver. So I just wanted to let you know that your zoning board considered that, and they saw no problem.
Mr. Harper.
Has anybody, during this whole process, the farmer's coming at me now, the Salt Fork Drainage District, have they been contacted? Because they have a 200-foot right-of-way, 100 foot from the center of that Salt Fork either way.
The fence is about 240 feet from the center line of the ditch.
But being very familiar and growing up around there my whole life, it can get really wet.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, those solar panels better have wings on them. Because we're hoping someday, because I've been contacted by the Salt Fork drainage people, that whole system through there, through Heather Hills and whatnot, eventually those banks need to be reshaped, seeded, the ditch dredged down through St. Joe and force that water south. Because from 1850 north, you're about 1750 there where you're at, 1725. From there north, the Salt Fork has a 5-foot fall for every mile of that ditch. From 1850 south, there's 1 foot of fall for every mile. So that water slows down trying to get through St. Joe, which backs up into everything around that town. You know, there again, it's lack of funding. I don't know whether Army Corps of Engineers or something someday, but I do know in discussions that they would love, I mean, it's been a problem. I'm 60-some years old. It's been a problem for years. But hopefully they can force that water, get it through St. Joe and on down south, where somebody else is going to have to deal with it, for my opinion. But I just wondered if Salt Fork Drainage people have been notified about this project.
We send notices out to drainage districts for any case that's in their jurisdiction, so they received a notice. Again, this is well outside their right-of-way, so it doesn't encroach.
Further discussion? But Mr. Vasisbani.
I guess if the area is so prone to flood, why is St. Joe looking to expand there, is my question.
Go on the other side.
I don't think we can answer that question. I figured that. Okay, see no more discussion, let's have a vote. Roll call, please.
Quisenberry.
No.
Rector. No. Rosales.
Yes.
Store. Yes. Summers.
Yes.
Vachaspati.
Yes.
Anderson.
No.
Clemens.
No.
Clifford.
No.
Coert. Douglas.
Yes.
Eisenman.
No.
Esri.
Yes.
Furtado. Goss.
No.
Harper.
No.
McGuire.
No.
Mitchell.
No.
Patterson.
Yes.
Petrie.
No.
Weibel.
Yes. Beth?
11,
Let's let the clerk.
10 yes, 11 no.
Okay, that motion fails. Next one.
I move adoption of ordinance number 2018-8, granting a special use permit in zoning case 907-S-18, Woodard Trust, St. Joseph East Community Photovoltaic Solar Farm.
Second by Mr. Patterson. Discussion on this item. Mr. Esri.
I'll just note that this is, again, in St. Joe's ETJ. It's well within the mile and a half, or the half mile even. But it is right across the road from the one previous solar farm that we've already approved, just north of the St. Joe Sportsman Club. So,
Further discussion? Okay, let's go with the roll call.
Quisenberry.
Yes.
Rector. No. Rosales.
Yes.
Store. Yes. Summers. Yes. Vachaspati.
Yes.
Anderson. No. Clemens.
No.
Clifford. No. Coert.
Yes.
Douglas. Yes. Eisenman.
No.
Esri.
yes.
Furtado.
Yes.
Goss.
No.
Harper.
No.
McGuire. Oh, God. Mitchell. No. Patterson.
Yes.
Petrie.
No.
Weibel.
Yes. I got 11-9.
11-9.
That motion passes. Mr. Esri, next one?
Yes, thank you. I move adoption of resolution number 2018-364, authorizing Champaign County application for round 4 of the Illinois Housing Development Authority Abandoned Residential Property Municipal Relief Program, APP.
Second.
Second by Mr. Quisenberry. Discussion. Ms. Douglas.
I support this. I think it's a great idea to do this, but I had a question about the grant application. I didn't know if anybody was here for that.
I believe Mr. Hall could try to answer questions.
I noticed on the amount that the jurisdiction is expended on maintaining, there's a significant increase for 2018. It goes from 9,000 to 27,000. I was wondering what was up with that.
What page is that on?
123. the very bottom.
Yeah, now that's on maintaining and demolishing. And most of that would be demolishing.
Okay.
Other questions? Seeing none, all in favor? Aye. All opposed? Motion carries. Thank you, Mr. Esri. Next, up, Highway and Transportation, we have one item at this time, Ms. Cowart. Actually, we're just presenting this transit service report, that's for information only, is that correct, Ms. Cowart? Okay. Let's go on to Finance, Ms. Furtado.
I move the adoption of resolution number 2018391, authorizing payment of claims.
Is there a second? Second by Mr. Goss, has his hand up early. Discussion. Seeing none, all in favor? Aye. All opposed? Motion carries.
I move the adoption of resolution number 2018392, authorizing purchases not following purchasing policy.
Is there a second? Second by Ms. Petrie. Discussion. Seeing none, all in favor? Aye. All opposed? Motion carries.
I move the adoption of resolution number 2018393, authorizing budget amendment 18-00065, Fund 080, General Corporate Department 041, State's Attorney, increased appropriation 65,000, revenue none from fund balance.
Second by Mr. Anderson. Discussion. Okay, we need a roll call of 15 votes. Roll call, please.
Quisenberry.
Yes.
Rector. Yes. Rosales.
Yes.
Storr. Yes. Summers. Yes. Vachaspati.
Yes.
Anderson. Yes. Clemens.
Yes.
Clifford. Yes. Cowart. Yes. Douglas.
Yes.
Eisenman.
Yes.
Esri.
Yes.
Furtado.
Yes.
Goss.
No.
Harper.
No.
McGuire. Mitchell. Patterson.
Yes.
Petrie.
Yes.
Weibel.
Yes, motion carries.
I move the adoption of ordinance number 201810, FY 2019 annual budget and appropriation ordinance.
Second by Mr. Rosales. Discussion of the budget. We need a roll call. It's a simple majority. Ms. Petrie.
I want to thank Ms. Ogden for providing us in the budget summary that nice Sankey diagram. It's very useful.
Thank you, Ms. Petrie. Further discussion? Okay, roll call, please.
Excuse me. Quisenberry.
Yes.
Rector. Yes. Rosales.
Yes.
Storr. Summers.
Yes.
Vachaspati. Yes. Anderson. Clemens.
Yes.
Clifford. Yes. Cowart.
Yes.
Douglas.
Yes.
Eisenman.
Yes.
Esri.
Yes.
Furtado.
Yes.
Goss.
Yes.
Harper. McGuire. Mitchell. Patterson.
Yes.
Petrie.
Yes.
Weibel.
Yes, motion carries. Okay, let's go on to policy personnel appointments. Mr. Rosales.
I move the adoption of resolution number 2018-394, appointing James Rusk to the Public Aid Appeals Committee, a term to last from 12/1/2018 through 11/30/2020.
Second by Mr. Anderson. Discussion. Mr. Patterson.
Just for the record, I'm going to recuse myself due to my employment as a case manager at the Cunningham Township Supervisor's Office.
Thank you. Further discussion? All in favor? Aye. All opposed? Motion carries.
I move the adoption of resolution number 2018-395, approving revised Appendix A to amendment between the CUPHD and the County of Champaign and Champaign County Health Department for the provision of public health services by CUPHD to the Champaign County Health Department.
Is there a second? Second by Mr. Patterson. Discussion. See none, all in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries. Okay, we move on to new business. There's some items here did not come from committee, so I'd ask for a motion to waive that rule for those items. Moved by Mr. Anderson, second by Ms. Petrie. Discussion, seeing none, all in favor? Aye. All opposed, motion carries. Okay, please coming back.
I told him to riff.
You're up, Ms. on the new business.
Adoption of Resolution 218396, authorizing budget amendment 18-00069, Fund 080, General Corporate, Department 127, Veterans Assistant Commission, increased appropriation 5,000, increased revenue 5,000.
Is there a second? Second by Mr. Esri. Discussion. Seeing none, roll call, please.
Quisenberry,
Yes.
Rector, Rosales,
Yes.
Store, Summers, Batrasbody, Anderson, Clemmons,
Yes.
Clifford, nope, Coert,
Yes.
Douglas,
Yes.
Eisenman,
Yes.
Esri,
Yes.
Furtado,
Yes.
Goss,
Yes.
Harper, McGuire, Mitchell, Patterson,
Yes.
Petrie,
Yes.
Weibel.
Yes, motion carries.
Adoption of resolution, I move adoption of resolution number 2018407 for authorization of facsimile signatures for the Champaign County Treasurer's accounts and Champaign County's collectors' accounts.
Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Mr. Rosales. Discussion. Seeing none, all in favor? Aye. All opposed, motion carries.
I move the adoption of resolution number 2018408 for authorization of signatures for the Champaign County Treasurer's accounts, Champaign County's collectors' accounts, and investment instruments or investment accounts.
Second by Mr. Storr. Discussion. Seeing none, all in favor? Aye. All opposed, motion carries.
Moving to your yellow packet, I move the adoption of resolution number 201, right? Oh, okay. But the actual papers are in the yellow packet, correct? Resolution number 2018409, authorizing administrators' full and final release of all claims to include attorney's fees, costs, and expenses for the estate of Caroline Scalzo.
Second by Mr. Anderson. Discussion. Mr. Vasserspati.
Can you just explain what this is, since this isn't something I've seen before on the agenda? If there's a one-sentence explanation. If it's just a procedural thing, that's fine.
It concerns a lawsuit.
It's the settlement of it. As is the next one.
Is there further discussion? All in favor? Aye. All opposed? Motion carries.
I move the adoption of resolution number 2018410, authorizing administrators' full and final release of all claims to include attorney's fees, costs, and expenses for the estate of Sonia Kington.
Second by Mr. Esri. Discussion. Seeing none, all in favor? Aye. All opposed? Motion carries.
All right, no, next packet. Back to purple, but a different purple packet. I move the adoption of resolution number 2018411, authorization for accounts payable loan authority to the nursing home fund from the general corporate fund.
Second by Ms. Court. Discussion. This is number 6 on the addendum.
On this purple, little purple, the skinny purple one.
How much money are we putting back into this thing again?
What this will do is will grant first in November to the administrator and in consultation with the chair, and then after that, when the new executive comes into office, the ability to up to $200,000 a month for the 4 months that this covers to pay bills that are owed to vendors that are of immediate and pressing emergency concern that will jeopardize the functioning of the home. Because we've had some cases in the last few weeks where that kind of thing was happening. So, I mean, these are core things like utilities, nursing staffing levels. And if we don't maintain those, just to be frank, it will not put us in a good position with the sale as we're moving forward to that completion. So since that's taking a little bit more time, we feel that this is the best method to ensure the continued care at the home.
So the sale is still moving forward. I mean, how much longer can they drag this out? I mean,
Currently, it's the fact that the county has opened surveys that have not been closed by IDPH. We cannot sell the nursing home until we have closed the annual survey and any other relevant complaints that are open with the Illinois Department of Public Health. It is hoped and anticipated that those may be closed as soon as in December, which would make the first available date for closing under the asset purchase agreement and operations transfer agreement, December 31st, with the buyer having the option for 2 30-day extensions, which would go through February 28th, which corresponds with the date in this resolution.
And I will point out, this is not a delay in any way, shape, or form on the behalf of the buyer.
No, this is not.
This is a procedural delay.
Right.
I just wonder how much more are we going to flush down a toilet here? I mean, I put some numbers together because I was pretty well set to go along with everything we were talking about until I read a little letter here last week and really put a craw in my throat. It says, too bad the small town and rural people weren't more engaged in what's going on in the Champaign County. I wish I knew who that person was, because I would like to explain to him that most of these people, residents of this county, are 3, 4, and 5 generations residents, settled this county, lived here, raised families here, paid their bills and taxes. So when I go through this and look and say from 2005 to 2016, we had a net operating loss of $12.7 million. That averages out to $1.2 million a year. So if you throw in 2017 and 18, that's another $2.4 million. That puts you at $15.1 million. You have $6.7 million worth of bonds to pay off, plus you owe the county $5.5 million. And if you borrow the full $800,000 there, that'll put them at 6.3. So you're looking at almost $28 million, not counting what we owe the vendors. I just, it's a good thing this thing's probably going to pass, because if it was me, I'd be sitting here saying, you got 30 days. You tell SAK to get off their ass and get this thing done. 21 violations, 24, whatever it might be. I thought we had an organization in this county called Champaign County Healthcare Consumers. They've been traveling all over the goddamn state trying to find things wrong with the new buyer. They could have stepped out the back door and found the damn problems. This really upsets me. I haven't been very good for the last few days. So please, people here in town, enlighten me. Make sure I'm engaged what's going on in this county.
Mr. Patterson.
We almost got the water shut off.
I know. That's what I say.
So the point is that if the water gets shut off or something like that, the home gets closed. The home gets closed, that hole you're talking about never gets filled.
All right. Thank you, both of you. Mr. Goss?
Yeah, I would like to be sure that whether we have to do it through amendment or not, that this is spelled out, that a maximum of $800,000. I don't want this to, I realize I can do the math, 4 months times 200,000, but I thought we were going to spell this out as $800,000 as a maximum.
I mean, I think that's clear, but I'll take that as a friendly amendment if you want to say, maximum of 800,000.
And maybe it's in here, I just had time to skim this, but I didn't see it in here.
Well, it just says monthly, so.
It says 200,000 a month times 4 months. I realized I can do the math. I just don't want this to get away from us. I'd like it spelled out as 800,000 maximum.
Take that as a.
Ms. Busey, you want to comment on that?
Well, it is an $800,000 maximum, but I would welcome where in the language of this resolution you would like to add that.
I mean, I think maybe some point in item number 3.
How about,
in the title?
how about at number 3, comment, whatever occurs earlier, comma, to a maximum of $800,000?
I'm amicable to either one of those suggestions, to be honest with you. I just think we need to spell it out.
We'll put that on item 3.
To a maximum of $800,000 after the word earlier.
Yeah, that works for me.
Is there any objection from the board? Ms. Petrie, you have an objection?
No, but I want a clarification on this.
Okay.
Because I was going to offer an amendment that this be raised to 1.2 million to go to the 30.
Okay, well,
Wait, can I finish?
Point of order, there's an amendment on the floor, you can't. have another
we have an amendment already.
Well, I would like to get to my point on that.
Okay.
And the wording then that Mr. Goss is suggesting needs to be wording such that if this isn't completed, if that home isn't settled by the end of February, then what will happen is the next board will be in the same situation and they will be coming forward. So is Mr. Goss's intent that this is 800,000 and the deal is done and over and there's no more? Or is this just 800,000 to the end of February?
My intention is this is 800,000 to the end of February, and if we haven't made movement on this, we still have SAK that can't keep the home clean. Then I think at some point we've got to look at this seriously as a board. At what point is this going to end? Because I'm not going to continue to throw $200,000 a month at this thing for the rest of 2019. It's irresponsible use of the taxpayers' money. And at some point, we've got to get to a resolution. I've bit my tongue as long as I will on our management over there. The company is not doing their job. They've not been held accountable. We have no way to hold them accountable. The sole reason, in my opinion, and this is one person's opinion, this is not going to close this month is because of our management firm. Mismanagement. And I'm telling you, I think this is costing the taxpayers money, and I think it's going to continue to cost the taxpayers money unless we get on this and get on board. We can't continue to fund this at the tune of $200,000 a month. That's why I want a maximum. At the end of February, we got to decide. In my opinion, is it going to close in 30 days? Fine. I'm right there. If we've still got 20 tags out there to clean up, something's got to change. And there's no way to make it change if we just keep feeding this animal $200,000 a month. I'm unwilling to do that. So that's my response to that.
May I respond? Thank you. There's no disagreement on my part. And it does need to be funded so things can move forward. I'm in total agreement with that. But the suggested wording doesn't accomplish what you're talking about. That's my concern. So how can there be the appropriate wording so that it shows that this is drop dead, no more, nothing else, that's it, over and out.
Let's rephrase this. Mr. Goss, I'm going to take your motion as an amendment. Is there a second to Mr. Goss's amendment? Moved by Ms. Petrie. That is on the floor. You heard what his amendment is.
Can I just add one clarification?
Yeah, go ahead.
I would just like to add for a maximum $800,000 over the 4-month period. Is that acceptable? So it's clear?
Acceptable.
Thank you.
So that's the amendment we're talking about. So we'll now discuss the amendment. Mr. McGuire.
Well, I think I'm hopeful that the sale closure, we keep saying closing, we can confuse people that way, but will happen, December. And obviously there'll be a new board coming on board in December. So I like the language that's currently suggested. I don't think that we need to increase the value. That new board can make decisions on what happens in February going forward if there's some other discussion that we have to have then. So I'd like to stay with what is suggested.
Mr. Quisenberry.
Yeah, I will support this amendment. I think that's where we need to stop because there's an urgency we need to communicate, and that 4-month period communicates that. And I think whether it's early January, mid-January, late January, I think the next board will be in the best frame of mind and have the information to know whether it is going to dribble past February or how much longer it's going to run, and that board should make that decision, not this board. If we try to make decisions out past 4 or 6 months, I think we're getting in the wrong territory.
Sorry. I guess I should raise.
Ms. Furtado.
And I want to say, as finance chair, Mr. Harper, I echo your frustration. Like, I am with you in the frustration. And I just want to ask on behalf of the county board to our new executive who's coming in, who's going to be playing a really important role on this 4-month, $800,000, that this has to be the priority. This is a priority. Monitoring this, keeping us informed of this, making sure we're not in this situation that we found ourselves in the last 2 weeks. And I do think that we originally had a proposal for 6 months, and Mr. McGuire asked us to think about 4 months, and I agreed with him. I think that's not a bad idea to have that conversation and to there has to be some more accountability. There has to be some more accountability with this. This last minute emergency thing isn't acceptable for these core service bills. It just isn't.
Discussion. Ms. Petrie.
Well, I will support it because I acknowledge this has to move forward. But there is nothing in here that is going to see to it that things end. And I hope I am wrong, but I don't see closure at the end of February.
Further discussion? All right. Seeing none, all in favor? Aye. All opposed? Motion carries. Next one.
Adoption of resolution number.
Oh,
you're right.
Right, you're right.
Sorry.
That was my fault. That was my fault. But back to the main motion.
Okay.
Mr. Clemens.
This would be a question more for Tammy Ogden. We've been beating up the fund balance so bad. Taking this extra $800,000 out of the fund balance, where's that going to put us?
Just for clarification, this resolution is for up to $200,000 each month. So it may not be an actual, $800,000 impact. May not be.
Let's play worst case scenario here.
So the fiscal year 2018 projection for the fund balance as it sits right now is 13.5%. Without the additional property tax revenue that was in the budget for 2019 and the one-time revenues that the county may receive if the home is sold, the projected fund balance was 12.8% at the end of fiscal year 2019. So if, 2 of these months would be in fiscal year 2019, so that would be potentially a $400,000 impact in 2019. Could put us, below our 12.5% fund balance, not significantly lower, but it would potentially be right around that minimum amount required by our financial policies.
Thank you. Ms. Petrie.
I need a little more review of this. I just listened to Mr. Harper and how much the debt is, so I don't see how our percentage and our fund balance can be what you are projecting when Mr. Harper's just run through some figures that add up to quite a bit of money.
I believe the numbers that he was referencing included the bonds and other amounts that do not impact the general fund balance.
Okay.
Further discussion? Okay, this votes on the main motion. All in favor? Aye. All opposed? Motion carries. Okay, next one, Ms. Furtado.
Adoption of resolution number 2018412, authorization for payroll loan authority to the nursing home fund from the general corporate fund.
Second by Mr. Anderson. Mr. Summers, I'm going to ask you to keep your voice down, please. Ms. Furtado.
So I just want to say on this is just a renewal. You might not realize, but when we approved this before, it sunsetted in November, so this is just a renewal of this. And I want to say specifically to this one, I want to extend my appreciation to Treasurer Farney, who's kept us very informed of this, who's been very helpful when I've called him on this, and for both of these, really, both the treasurer who helped generate this plan and to Deb and to Tammy, when this presented them last week, scrambled to come up with a solution, and we're very proactive and working on trying to come up with a solution in what's a really difficult sort of situation. So thanks to the treasurer and thanks to staff for keeping us informed of this and coming up with mechanisms as frustrating and as imperfect as they can be to keep us moving.
Did we have a second on this one? Okay, discussion on this one. Ms. Petrie.
I have a question. I do thank Mr. Farney for doing this and handling it so well in the past. Has this been looked over by the new treasurer?
The new treasurer's not in office, so I don't think they have any
So
authority.
the new treasurer is going to have to do this and
Well,
implement.
that's right.
Well, we just had a discussion about doing things ahead.
If you want to, you can take it to the new treasurer. Further discussion? If none, all in favor? Aye. All opposed? Motion carries. Thank you, Ms. Furtado. Next up is policy, personnel, and appointments. Mr. Rosales.
In the amended package, Section B, Policy, Personnel, and Appointments. This is a move toward the adoption of the revised resolution number 2018-397, approving property liability and workers' compensation insurance.
Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Ms. Petrie. We'll point out we have Ms. Heiser, Ms. Rollins here, who would love to come up and talk about this.
Good evening, everyone. does anybody have any specific questions, or do you want me to just give you a brief overview of what's happening with the nursing home? Okay. So we have put together an estimation of hopefully selling 1231. So we've included a 1-month premium for keeping the nursing home on. Unfortunately, the nursing home suffered several losses in the last 2 years that were very high. And this has caused a significant premium increase for the nursing home section specifically. Everything else went down, which is good, but the nursing home is written on a form called a claims-made form, which means we have to purchase what is called tail coverage to keep the claim reporting open after the nursing home is sold, because you could be sued for up to 2 years afterwards for any claims that arise back when the policy was in force. This would be a 2-year purchase, a 2-year coverage with a one-time purchase that would be made whenever the nursing home closes. This would be a separate policy that would run for, as I said, 2 years. So if a claim does come in, your coverage is still technically in force. That is the only significant change to coverage. So we're just waiting to hear what happens with the nursing home, and that will depend on how pricing ends up. But we're keeping our fingers crossed for a 12/31 close, because that's our best case scenario. I know insurance is fun. Are there any questions? I see a lot of confusing looks.
Okay. Patsy? None?
I wasn't aware that it had a window of 2-year time. That's going to be very interesting for the next board.
Yes, and that was reviewed with your legal personnel as well, and that's.
Oh, I'm sure it was.
Yeah.
I understand that.
Okay.
It's just new information. I didn't realize that.
Great, and I think we could move on to the voting. Pius?
No further discussion? Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries. Thank you, Ms. Rollins. Thank you, Ms. Heiser, for attending this meeting. You're welcome to stay for the rest of the meeting, of course.
Now we go back to the purple sheet. Item number 2, that's actually 8B2, adoption of resolution number 2018-398, relating to participation by the elected officials in the Illinois Municipal Retirement Fund, RMF.
Second by Mr. Esri. Discussion? Seeing none, all in favor? All opposed? Motion carries.
Number 3, request to send position of road foreman for the Highway Department to the Job Content Evaluation Committee for review and recommendation.
Second by Mr. Anderson. Discussion? Seeing none, all in favor? Aye. All opposed? Motion carries. Can I have a roll call? We can show of hands. Show of hands for who voted yes. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13. Those who vote no. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. It passes.
Last but not least, request to send position of Assistant County Engineer for Highway Department to the Job Content Evaluation Committee for review and recommendation.
Is there a second? Second by Ms. Cowart. Discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All opposed? Let's do a show of hands again. All in favor? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. All opposed? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. That motion passes. Okay, thank you, Mr. Rosales.
Thank you.
Okay, Highway and Transportation, Ms. Cowart.
Okay, there's 2 items on the Highway and Transportation, and I'm going to ask Rita to come up because they come from Regional Planning and not the Highway Committee. Item number one is adoption of resolution number 2018-405, authorizing execution and amendment of the federal 5311 grant agreement, grant number OP-19-C6-FED, agreement number 4967.
We have,
Mr. Esri, second. Go ahead, Rita.
okay, good evening. We have a short presentation just in case you have questions, but if you have questions, we can answer the questions right now.
What do people want? People want, how long is the presentation?
No, 5 minutes.
But
For
what-
this one, it's 2 minutes. It's
Let's,
just to
let's
show
do
the
it.
numbers.
Go ahead.
Okay, go ahead.
So this is, when we get our grant agreement, we need it approved by the county board with a resolution. We received the same amount of grant funds that we requested and those same funds that we sent to the county board in April. And this is just a snapshot of last year. We usually run out of our federal funds within Q2, but we spend the rest. But we spend dope through Q4.
And basically, what we are requesting is to approve the agreement that is in accordance with the budget that you approved back in April. It's the same amount, no changes at all. We are actually spending those funds because the fiscal year started July 1st, but it's until now that we'll receive the agreement from IDOT. The day after having the highway committee, the Monday following having the highway committee.
Questions, discussion. Ms. Petrie.
Just in case the public is staying with us this late, why don't you quickly review how the funds are used? What aspects of transportation are you supporting with these funds?
These funds go towards the operation for rural transit, so driver salaries and vehicle maintenance and whatnot.
Mr. Busterspotty.
Yeah, why is the expended amount so much less than the budgeted amount?
Basically, this is a new transit system in Champaign County. We started operating the system back in 2011, and the system has been growing. Then, in order for us to spend down all the money, we need more drivers, and we need more vehicles, and we need more local match to be able to use all the funding allocated.
And are you, I guess, I assume you're working on that?
We have been working on that over the years, but it takes time to grow the system to be able to spend down all the money.
Thank you.
Further discussion? See none, all in favor? Aye. All opposed? Motion carries.
Okay, we need adoption of resolution number 2018-46, authorizing Champaign County application for competitive federal transit administration funds.
Second by Mr. Esri. Rita, go ahead.
Yes, we just want to make clear to you that we already submitted the grant. The reason for coming here so late after submitting the grant is because we were notified by IDOT that we had to apply for the grant as Champaign County instead of applying as Champaign County Regional Planning Commission, because it was the only way for them to provide us with the local match that is required by the grant, because Champaign County is the guarantee. Then we didn't have time to come here before you to ask for approval before submitting the grant. Then we are here to ask for forgiveness, if I can say that.
This is not the first time that's happened. Not from Rita, but it's other people too. It's not just Rita. we can't arrange the calendar to fit our schedule. Do you want to say anything else about this, Rita, this grant?
Basically, we want to give you an overview on what is the grant about it.
Sure. So as opposed to the other grant agreement that we mentioned earlier, those are formula grants, but this is actually a competitive grant by the Federal Transit Administration. This is a part of their Access and Mobility Partnership Grant to identify innovative solutions, mostly towards seniors, individuals with disabilities, and low-income individuals. Another requirement I didn't list on there is that it must be relevant to the Human Service Transportation Plan, which is what we work with. And what we applied for is one of the goals that we have in there is to implement a one-call, one-click center, which is what we applied for funds. Basically, this would be a Champaign County resident could phone in and ask for travel training, and they could provide that, whether for public transit. Some people prefer physical mailers to information as opposed to over the phone, so they could send that. They could schedule rides based on needs. We don't just have public transit, we have volunteer organizations that provide trips. They would also do eligibility determinations, so Medicaid or Dash Pass that MTD provides. And then, of course, out-of-county trip coordination, which would particularly benefit of Champaign County veterans who struggle to get into the neighboring Vermilion County Veterans Affairs Facility. The reason that we're choosing to have this access by phone call is because these transit-dependent populations would be more likely to have a phone as opposed to the internet. We had 8 letters of support. I won't read them, but they are listed there. And 3 of those organizations are the ones that provided local match. Like we said, we already submitted this application on November 13th. Our total request was $595,000. Our local match requirement was 50% operational, 20% capital. So our total pledged local match was $1,032.80. So the Community Foundation of East Central Illinois provided the capital local match, and MTD and IDOT provided the operational local match if we receive this grant.
Questions, discussion? Ms. Petrie.
Do you have any sense of the largeness of the population that you are going to try to reach, and how large the region is that you are hoping to reach?
Well, we would initially start in Champaign County and hope to expand. We don't have an exact number, but we do have maps and data, census data on the transit-dependent populations that would benefit from this.
We don't have the numbers with us. We can send you an email with that information.
Further discussion? Seeing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All opposed? Motion carries. Thank you, Ms. Court.
Thank you.
Okay, we're going on to other business. We've got a couple items here. For item A, I'd like to ask Mr. Clifford if you would move and read this first resolution.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Resolution honoring retired and County Board Member Jack Anderson. Whereas Jack Anderson was sworn in as Champaign County Board Member on December 1, 2014, and whereas Jack Anderson has served the citizens of Champaign County as a representative of Champaign County District 2 from December 1, 2014 until November 30th, 2018. And whereas during his tenure as a Champaign County Board Member, Jack Anderson served on various committees, including Committee of the Whole, for the Justice, Social Services, Finance, Policy, Personnel, and Appointments from 2014 to 2018. County Facilities from 2014 to 2018. County Administrators Search Committee in 2016. And the Legislation Committee in 2018. And whereas during his tenure as a Champaign County Board Member, Jack Anderson also served in a liaison position as the County Board's representative on Lincoln Legacy Committee, the Champaign County Nursing Home Board of Directors, the Lincoln Heritage RC&D, and as an alternate representative for Workforce Development And whereas during his tenure as Champaign County Board member, Jack Anderson also served in a leadership role as the chair of the Champaign County Nursing Home Board of Directors from 2017 to 2018. And whereas the Champaign County Board seeks to publicly recognize the commitment and dedication of Jack Anderson, who served the citizens of Champaign County as an elected official over the term of 4 years. Now, therefore, be it resolved that the Champaign County Board hereby recognizes the service of Jack Anderson and the benefit that service brought to county government. And be it further resolved that a copy of this resolution be presented to Jack Anderson in recognition of his years of service to the citizens of Champaign County. Presented, adopted, approved, and recorded this 27th day of November, AD 2018. Thank you, Jack.
Is there a second? Second by Mr. Esri. See no further discussion. All in favor? Aye. All opposed? Motion carries. Next item, I'd like to ask Mr. Director to read and move the next resolution.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I move adoption of resolution number 2018-400, honoring retired county board member Max Mitchell. Whereas Max Mitchell was sworn in as a Champaign County board member on February 23, 2012, and whereas Max Mitchell has served the citizens of Champaign County as a representative of the Champaign County Board District 3 from February 23, 2012 until November 30, 2012, and as a representative of Champaign County Board District 5 from December 1, 2012 until November 30, 2018. And whereas during his tenure as a Champaign County Board member, Max Mitchell served on the various committees, including Committee of the Whole for Justice and Social Services, Finance, Policy, and Personnel and Appointments from 2012 to 2018, and the Highway and Transportation Committee from 2012 to 2018. And whereas during his tenure as a Champaign County Board member, Max Mitchell also served in a liaison position as the County Board's representative with the Board of Directors of Visit Champaign County, as well as the County Board's representative with the Economic Development Corporation from December 19, 2017 until November 30th, 2018. And whereas during his tenure as Champaign County Board member, Max Mitchell also served in a leadership role as the Vice Chair of the Highway and Transportation Committee from March 23, 2017 until November 30th, 2018. And whereas the Champaign County Board seeks to publicly recognize the commitment and dedication of Max Mitchell, who served the citizens of Champaign County as an elected official over a term of almost 6 years. Now, therefore, be it resolved that the Champaign County Board hereby recognizes the service of Max Mitchell and the benefit that service brought to the county government. And be it further resolved that a copy of this resolution be presented to Max Mitchell in recognition of his years of service to the citizens of Champaign County. Presented, adopted, approved, and recorded this 27th day of November, AD 2018.
Second by Mr. Goss. Seeing no further discussion. All in favor? Aye. All opposed? Motion carries. Next, I'd like to have Ms. Douglas to move the next resolution.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I move adoption of resolution number 2018-401, honoring retired county board member Patsy Petrie. Whereas Patsy Petrie was sworn in as a Champaign County board member on December 6, 2010, and whereas Patsy Petrie has served the citizens of Champaign County as a representative of the Champaign County Board District 6 from December 6, 2010 until November 30th, 2018, and whereas during her tenure as a county board member, Patsy Petrie served on the various committees including Committee of the Whole for Highway and Transportation, Environment and Land Use, and County Facilities from 2010 to 2012, Committee of the Whole for Justice and Social Services, Finance, Policy, Personnel, and Appointments from 2010 to 2018, Litigation Committee from 2015 to 2018, Strategic Planning Committee from 2014 to 2018, County Administrator Search Committee in 2016, Facilities Finance Planning Committee in 2016, and the Environment and Land Use Committee from 2012 to 2018. And whereas during her tenure as a Champaign County Board member, Patsy Petrie also served in a liaison position as a county board representative with the Regional Planning Commission from 2012 to 2016, the Extension Services Board, the Regional Offices of Education and Workforce Development from 2014 to 2016, and whereas during her tenure as a Champaign County Board member, Patsy Petrie also served in a leadership role as the County Board Chair from 2014 to 2016, Chair of the Public Aid Appeals Committee from 2014 to 2016, Chair of the Facilities Finance Planning Committee in 2016, and Vice Chair of the Environment and Land Use Committee from 2016 to 2018. And whereas the Champaign County Board seeks to publicly recognize the commitment and dedication of Patsy Petrie, who served the citizens of Champaign County as an elected official over a term of 8 years. Now, therefore, be it resolved that the Champaign County Board hereby recognizes the service of Patsy Petrie and the benefit that service brought to county government. And be it further resolved that a copy of this resolution be presented to Patsy Petrie in recognition of her years of service to the citizens of Champaign County. Presented, adopted, approved, and recorded this 27th day of November, AD 2018.
Is there a second? Second by Mr. Rosales. All in favor? Aye. All opposed? Motion carries. For the next resolution, I'd like to ask my former neighbor to move it, please.
Start at the top or start whereas? Whereas C. Pius Weibel has served the citizens of Champaign County as a representative of the Champaign County Board, District 7, from December 6, 2004 until November 30th, 2012, and again from December 1st, 2014 until November 30th, 2018. And whereas during his tenure as a Champaign County Board member, C. Pius Weibel served on the various committees, including County Facilities from 2004 to 2010, Highway and Transportation from 2004 to 2006, and 2006 to 2018, Finance Committee from 2006 to 2008, Policy, Personnel, and Appointments from 2008 to 2010, Committee of the Whole from 2010 to 2012, and 2014 to 2018. Environmental Land Use from 2014 to 2016, and on the following special committees: Public Aid Appeals Committee, Strategic Planning Committee, Executive Transition Committee, County Administrator Evaluation Committee, RFP 2018-001 Evaluation Committee, Labor Committee, and Litigation Committee. And whereas during his tenure as a Champaign County Board member, C. Pius Weibel also served in a liaison position as the County Board's representative on the Champaign Consortium, Community Services Block Grant Board, Champaign-Urbana Public Health District, CUUATS, CUATS, Developmental Disabilities Board, Extension Services Board, Head Start Policy Board, Muhammad Aquifer Consortium, MLK Committee, Lincoln Heritage, RC&D, Regional Planning Commission, Reentry Council, Liquor Advisory Commission, Regional Office of Education, and Workforce Development. And whereas during his tenure as a Champaign County Board member, C. Pius Weibel also served in a leadership role as the County Facilities Committee Vice Chair from 2004 to 2006, the Environment and Land Use Committee Vice Chair from 2014 to 2016, and as Chair of the following special committees: the Public Aid Appeals Committee from 2006 to 2012 and 2016 to 2018, Strategic Planning Committee from 2017, County Executive Transition Committee in 2018, County Administrator Evaluation Committee from 2017 to 2018, and RFP 2018-001 Evaluation Committee. And whereas during his tenure as a Champaign County Board member, C. Pius Weibel led the County Board as County Board Chair from 2006 to 2012, and again from 2016 to 2018, providing leadership through his insightful, balanced, and comprehensive attention to all issues requiring deliberation and action by the county board. And whereas the Champaign County Board seeks to publicly recognize the commitment and dedication of C. Pius Weibel, who served the citizens of Champaign County as an elected official over terms totaling 12 years and as chair for 8 years, providing stable and measured leadership in the development and implementation of good governance and management of the county board's responsibilities and resources. Now, therefore, be it resolved that the Champaign County Board hereby recognizes the service of C. Pius Weibel and the benefit that service brought to county government, and be it further resolved that a copy of this resolution be presented to C. Pius Weibel in recognition of his years of service, public service, and leadership to the citizens of Champaign County. Presented, adopted, approved, and recorded this 27th day of November, AD 2018.
Is there a second? Second by Mr. Esri. All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. We have one more resolution. We don't have to read this, but Mr. McGuire, would you move this one, please?
Yes, thank you. Whereas Dan Walsh was elected the citizens of Champaign County to serve as sheriff of Champaign County on November 5th, 2002, and was subsequently re-elected to that office on November 7th, 2006, November 2nd, 2010, November 4th, 2014, and whereas throughout his 16-year tenure as sheriff of Champaign County, Dan Walsh served the citizens of Champaign County in an exemplary manner and achieved success in all areas of operation of the Champaign County Sheriff's Office. As evidence in his ability to build strong collaboration while overseeing operations with a commitment to a strong fiscal management, enabled him to accomplish the greatest outcomes within the limited resources available. And whereas Sheriff Walsh regularly worked with a team of police chiefs of Champaign County to maximize the sharing and strength of law enforcement services provided throughout the county, and whereas Sheriff Walsh regularly worked with the county's criminal justice system management, including the president, presiding judge, state's attorney, public defender, and director of court services to ensure the most effective management of the daily population of the county jail, developing programs and initiatives to ensure incarcerated individuals provided with timely opportunities for release, and other programming options while held in the county jail. And whereas Sheriff Walsh worked diligently in the county with the county board in developing recommendations and solutions for the issues related to facilities management of the county's 2 jails. And whereas Sheriff Walsh managed a workforce of over 150 full-time employees and an annual budget of over $12 million, and successfully created an environment of partnership within the workforce and attention and commitment to always operating within the constraints of the budget set for him by the county board, fully participating and accepting budget cuts when they are necessary based on economic downturns within which the county board had to operate. And whereas Sheriff Walsh has been an outstanding leader in his role as Champaign County Sheriff and has provided the greatest level of service to the citizens of Champaign County. Now, therefore, be it resolved that the County Board of Champaign County hereby recognizes that the service of Dan Walsh was an asset to the citizens of Champaign County and expresses gratitude and sincere appreciation for 16 years' service and more. Be it further resolved that a copy of this resolution is presented to Dan Walsh as an expression of appreciation for his collaborative, dedicated leadership throughout his tenure as Champaign County Sheriff. Presented, adopted, approved, recorded this 27th day, November AD 2018.
Second by Mr. Goss. All in favor? Aye. All opposed? Motion carries. I want to point out we'll deliver a copy of the resolution to Sheriff Walsh tomorrow at his reception. Okay, we just have one more item. That's board member reflections. I'd like to start out with point out that we have a couple of short timers here. Mr. James Quisenberry, Ms. Tracy Douglas, who took time to get on the board and work for the county, which I want to appreciate that. So I think let's give them a standing, or a sitting applause. And also I want to thank all of you for serving the county. I've probably bumped heads with all of you a couple times, some of you more, but we come back together and we work on things, and that's the way it should be done. So any of you have comments, now's the time to do it. I also want to thank Ms. Busey. It's nice working with you again. Ms. Petrie.
Yes, I like to read something into the record. As I leave the county board, I want to welcome the newly elected members and thank those who are remaining on the board. There is much to accomplish during the next 2 to 4 years. The most important issues are excellent means of communication, transparency, and decision-making in the best interests of the county and use of taxpayer dollars. On every vote that I cast, I ask myself those two questions because elected officials have a fiduciary responsibility. The probability of voters supporting the removal of tax caps or voting for home rule, both of which can generate more tax dollars for the county, is next to zero, so the county will continue to have to work within a tight budget. Even though my research area is decision-making, during my 8-year tenure, I have learned even more about the importance of decision-making and policy, in particular the budget as the primary policy document. The biggest lesson over the years is the extent to which taxpayer dollars have been used ineffectively, inefficiently, and in a wasteful manner. I've done a back-of-the-envelope calculations on 6 to 8 of the major county projects, beginning with the downtown jail. Unfortunately, the aggregated wasted tax dollars over these decades, with both Republicans and Democrats majority in power, is sufficient in amount to have covered the maintenance of the county buildings, probably avoided the present situation of selling the nursing home, established mental health facilities, upgraded all IT aspects, and merged the jails to include touch visitations, expanded health care, education, certificate programs, to enumerate a few. Everyone I have talked with agrees Champaign County needs mental health facilities, so it is now time for the communities, police departments, county hospitals, mental health board, CU, PhD to agree to an intergovernmental agreement stating such and agreeing on the means for funding the first 5 years, giving a mental health facility time to get well established, apply for grant funding. We already know about an excellent model in Texas. Back to transparency, if the public had been given the actual financial information about the old nursing home, it would have been apparent that building a new home was not a prudent decision. But alas, this was not the case, and we are here today. The county board is still too big even after 2 previous reductions in the size. It might be in the best interest of serving constituents to have geographically smaller one-member districts, say anywhere between 13 and 17, an odd number rather than an even number. The potential within this county is such that this county could be the model for like-sized counties. I look forward to the new board making this happen. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Petrie. Any other comments? Mr. Anderson.
Just briefly, I think like many of you, there was a time in my life when you just get tired of sitting on the recliner reading the paper and complaining. And at some point, and I share this with people when they ask, why do you get involved? It's because you can either complain or you can make a difference. And I think what I'm going to miss most is the people here. I don't always agree with everybody's thoughts, not even those in my own caucus, but I enjoy the debate. I enjoy the interchange of ideas. It's not something we find common in our own home communities necessarily. There aren't many people who understand all the issues and the complexities of government and governance. So that I will miss the most, and that is you individuals. So thank you for your friendship and your camaraderie.
Thank you, Mr. Anderson. But are you going to go home and sit in that chair now?
Your colleague is
Mr. Mitchell.
Great. I'll be brief, but I know that the time is past 9 o'clock and, they shut us off on TV at 9.
You go to bed.
I do that too, but they shut us off at 9, so everybody now at home is watching reruns of Matlock. But anyway, I really have enjoyed, and it's been a learning experience. And, so I'm looking forward to that. And, there's still, and my birthday was yesterday, so there's a lot of still good years left that I'll be able to. And I'm really happy that nobody really beat up on me because for my inability to communicate. Thank you.
Thank you, Max. Anybody else? Mr. McGuire.
Well, Pius, I wanted to thank you for the hard work you've done, and obviously in the middle of both groups trying to manage a lot of things that have happened. I don't think everything is always the way we want it to be, and as long as what Jack said, that we communicate with each other, try to work together, I think we can get things done. And obviously, Patsy has the communication part down, but I've really enjoyed working with you, Patsy, ever since we were traveling back and forth to Springfield when we first met. And I will miss that. I'll miss the discussions that we have. But I appreciate your work. And Quiz, I'm sure we'll see each other again, always, and it's always been good working with you. And of course, my caucus mates, Max, we'll see. But you both have been really great to work with and have been done a great job. So I'll be looking forward to working with all of you in the next board. But thank you.
All right, thank you. Anybody else? Okay, for the last time, we're adjourned.